Okay. Um, I'm going to drop the slides in the chat. Some of you may realize that we are using a new system here, which we will talk about in just a minute. Um, so if you cannot access the slides when I put them in the chat, it's probably because you don't have access to the drive that we're using. And in a minute, we'll help you get access. So you can request access if you would like, and then it might help us know who doesn't have access and who doesn't. But for now, we're going to start with some good news and good humor. Um, I wanted to, as we get into the legislative session or we get into this doldrums of winter, I felt like it would be important to talk about some of the positive things that are happening. And I had an experience yesterday as I was working on a data report for the Grow Your Own program. Um, our colleagues down at Granite School District put in their fiscal report some great examples or like testimonials from people who have participated in the program. And it was really fun to read those and to see how the program has been affecting people. And it's definitely something I think I'm going to put in our report to share with the legislatures, and hopefully we'll get some more funding for that. But it was really cool to read and to see how those funds have been able to help people become teachers and school counselors and school psychs. And so it was really great to see that. Is there anybody else have any good news or good humor that they would like to share with us today?
Lisa, can I piggyback on that? Because we've put
Sure.
two school counselors through that Grow Your Own program, and it's so
Hmm.
fantastic. One is taking her last class this semester. She's done her internship hours, and she's one of those people who the minute you meet her, you know that she was born to be a school counselor, but then you get into life and life has its own expenses that come with it. And so to be able to have the state invest in that and now watch this person become a full-fledged counselor and not have to bear the brunt of the financial obligation that it's been has been so fantastic. So last year when they pulled the funding, I literally wanted to cry because I've seen how fantastic that program has been, and so grateful if it comes back.
Awesome. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I may reach out for some details to put in our report as well. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share? It doesn't have to be about Grow Your Own. Okay, well, I'm going to give you a homework assignment that you come up with something to share next month. Sound good? Hopefully, you'll find some good news, good humor in the next month that you can share with us. Okay, so we're going to go on to our agenda. And I think I'm going to turn the time over to Jennifer.
Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to um, talk about our legislative updates. As you know, the legislative session has begun, and if you follow that at all, there's lots of bills to get um, interested in and to kind of keep track of. And then also we're going to talk about some board rule amendments and some new competency implementation updates. And then we have some exciting information about our educator evaluation system and how that will work with Apple. And we have Julie Lundell here with us that she's going to be helping us with that. And then we'll have some time at the end for some questions and answers. And so our learning intention for today is to understand the elements of the new growth orientation evaluation for educators and expectations for evaluating your APPEL candidates. And so we're going to give you some help and some guidelines for that. And then our success criteria will be if you are able to share your plans or intentions for evaluating candidates and the new competencies and how we at USBE can support you. And so we're hoping we can help you with that path.
Sorry, did I lose the slides? Can you still
We
see the
still see,
slides?
We can.
Oh, okay, good. I pulled up the Zoom and I see some chats for good news and that Joylyn ate four cook. I forgot to check the chat. So thank you, Joylyn, for sharing that you had cookies for breakfast. That's great. Okay, sorry. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay.
So, as many of you know, we have a new collaboration drive and we are transitioning all of our materials to a new home. And it's going to be a resource for all of you. And we'll have slides and all of the things that we have created put into this drive. And we know that some of you do not have access because this is limited to members or subscribers. And so if you are part of the Apple Directors listserv, then you probably have been given access to this collaboration Google Drive. But if you do not have that, then please let us know. We're trying to get everyone updated and make sure we have the correct emails for everyone and getting everything put together. So some of you may see documents that are public, but they're going to be view only. And so just keep that in mind. And the old folder will be active for another month, just so that you still have access to all of your materials before we switch over to the new drive. And Lisa, we lost our slides.
Yeah. Okay. I think I've got everybody. But if somebody who's watching this later needs access, just shoot us an email and we'll get that resolved.
So, as most of you know, I am Jennifer Prince and I am the new Apple Support Specialist. I took Andrew's place. Andrew no longer works at USBE, and we're really sad and we will really miss him. Um, and Sammy Willie is our new literacy specialist. And if you have any questions about the Euphora or if you need vouchers or any of those fun things that have to do with the foundations of reading, you can reach out to Sammy and her email is right there. And then we have a new educator preparation competency specialist who is going to start on February 18th. And so they will take my place. And so we're excited to have that person join us.
We'll introduce them next month. Okay.
Okay, so foundations of reading. So the Apple candidates that are in early childhood, elementary, and special education whose PLP was established after August 31st, 2022 are required to pass the foundations of reading. This is just kind of a reminder. The passing score is 240 and it went into effect this last September. And so now the candidates are required to meet that passing score of 240. So if they take the test and they do not pass, then we do have some options. And those options are if they meet if they're in the threshold of one standard deviation below that 240, they qualify for the flex option. And so they have to score like a 231 to a 239 in order to be eligible. And they sign up for just one, either the 900 or the 901. They don't have to do both. And so then if they pass that, then they are considered with a passing score. And so there has been some confusion with that. They still can not pass the flex part, but so far with the candidates who have taken the flex, I don't think we've had anyone that has not passed it. And so it's just one of the content questions that they resubmit. Well, it's not the one from this test, but it's like an additional question. And so that's a great option. It's much cheaper if that is an option for your candidates. The other pathway that we have is the micro-credentials. There are 3 micro-credentials, and they do need to complete all 3, and they need to pass all 3 in order for that to be counted as a pathway to meeting that foundations of reading or requirement. Joylyn asks, when we recommend them and they do the micro-credential pathway, how do you want us to indicate it, or will you be looking it up? They should have it on a Midas transcript that they can submit when you do your recommending. If it's and we are working on, I believe, to put it on Cactus. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's
So that we can see it.
did I mute myself again? No. Cactus currently has the capability to have the foundations of reading and the flex options uploaded. We do batch uploads on those. And then we are working on trying to get a batch upload for the micro credentials. So it's currently not available yet, but hopefully we'll at least get the test option in Cactus, and then we'll work with Davis to try and do a batch upload on those. If for some reason we can't do a batch upload, then we'll need to look them up in Midas with their transcript, and that may only happen when they call and request us. Or you could send a copy of their transcript with their recommendation letter, although we're doing it through SM Apply now, so that might not work. Anyway, so we'll have to come up with a system in doing that. But the intent is that they will need to be in Midas when they're recommended. Um, so hopefully we can get that worked out. It could be Shonda's asking or Joylyn's asking if we should submit the Midas transcript with the letter. Let's wait on that. I'm hoping you won't have to do that we can just get it set up so that we can do a batch upload. But if for some reason that doesn't work, that might be the way we have to go. That might be a plan B. So we'll let you know.
We just want to remind you that if a candidate completes letters, that does not take away this requirement. They still have to take Euphoria at least once before they can be recommended for licensure. And they have to take it at least once before they can do the flex or the micro credential option. So just keep that in mind that the test is required. So Crystal, they have to score a 231 to a 239.
To
Oh,
do the
no,
flex option. Yeah.
there's no score requirement for the micro credential option. And Susan, yes, these are the options for those who don't pass. So they can use these alternate pathways if they do not want to take the test again. Yes. So hopefully that answered both of your questions. And if you have any other questions, Sammy is great. And Sammy, do you want to wave or say hi so they can see your
Yeah.
cute face?
Oh, thanks. I was just gonna jump in like from a financial perspective as well, because that's something that has come up with some different candidates. So they get the voucher for the Euphoria the first time. But then if they go to take it the second time, it's that same cost. The flex option, I believe, off the top of my head, is $69, right in that range. And then the micro credentials are going to be 20 per micro credential, and there's 3 of them. So I always like to, when I've got a candidate that's kind of, wondering about financial burden, I like to make sure that they have that information as well. But it's nice to meet all of you. I've talked to quite a few of you already, I think. But I'm happy to help in any way. So feel free to reach out. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yvonne is asking about the course number for the micro-credential, and it's in the links to those are in the flex option document, which I will go grab and drop in the chat in just a minute. Whoops.
Okay, so I'm really excited
Oh,
that
Sammy's
we are
got it. Thanks, Sammy.
oh, that we are going to start some office hours, and these are going to happen every Friday from 1 to 2, and they're optional, completely optional. But if you have questions and you want to jump on, I will be there. Lisa will be there as she can, and Camilla, so that we can answer your questions, because I know that there's always questions that are coming up, and hopefully that will give you a way to just hop on and ask your questions, and we can get those answered quickly. So there was a calendar invite that was sent yesterday in the listserv. So hopefully you got that and you can see those where the office hour invitation.
Um, this doesn't mean that we won't set up a special meeting to meet with you if you would like. So if you can't make this time or something comes up and we need to meet with you separately, feel free to reach out and we'll schedule a different time. Okay. I'm going to quickly do just these two slides, and then I might turn this over to Malia because I think I saw her here. She does legislative updates really well. On our USBE webpage, there front and center, right there at the very front, is a link to this 2025 legislative session. And when you click on that link there is a couple of resources that can help if you're the type of person that really wants to track these bills and to see how things are going. One of the resources we have is what the board has requested for statutory changes. So that would be changes to Utah code, like the language of it, to either clarify or to adjust language in the code. And then prioritize funding requests. The board does have a prioritized list of funding requests. I believe the WPU is number one because it's like always number one. But then there's other requests there that they've sent to the governor's office and to the legislature. So if you're curious about where does a certain program fall, you could check that out. Throughout the session, the board will also meet. They meet every Thursday, and they may decide to take a position on a certain bill as it comes up. So these may change depending on how the session goes. And then this big one is the 2025 Education Bill Tracking Sheet that is really huge, but this is what basically all of the education related bills that have come up. And this is updated several times throughout the day. But you can see the bill title, the summary, the status, fiscal impacts, and regulatory impacts here. So if you're not sure where to start, I'd recommend this tracking sheet. And and then if there's a particular bill that you've heard that has come up, you can search here to see, if the board takes a position on it, they'll also put that there. So it's kind of like the catch-all information for bills if that's something you're interested in. So the session started this week on Tuesday at noon, and so we've had quite a few bills introduced already. At the end of the session, there will be additional resources here that'll say what the summary was, and then kind of the quick guide that will also be available if you just kind of want to ignore everything until the end of the session, but you still want to know what happened. You can come back here and look it up. Or if you were watching and missed something, which happens to me all the time, you can come back here and look it up. So these are some of the bills that have come up so far, and maybe I will turn the time over to Malia to talk about these.
Yes, hello, good morning. Happy to be with you. I'm Malia Height. I'm the executive coordinator of educator licensing, and the legislative session is off to a full roar. This bill is Senate Bill 99. It's sponsored by Senator Fillmore. It was discussed yesterday in the Senate Education Committee, so you can see that debate and how it went. This really is shoring up some timeline things and appropriation requirements, and it requires the USBE to have the data system that will house all of the data that will decide who is qualified for these additional pays for excellent teaching. So that's the highlights of 99. It really doesn't change anything about the program itself. It does, I believe, make principal evaluations optional, but these are kind of the big ticket items for this one. Any questions on this one? I know this is one that everybody's watching. Um, Currently, we've got 14 of the 41 districts have opted in, and 30 of the 150 plus charter schools have opted in to this program. So that is going to be an interesting one to watch for sure. Um, yeah, so
Nuts.
if you link to the website, the legislative session website, it will always show the most updated version is what will be there. Yeah, I know. If anybody figures out a way to do non-tested subjects, every single person would be interested in learning how to do that. Because today, the only teachers who are eligible are, first of all, teachers who are teaching in a tested area and grade. So if you have figured out a way to reliably assess student achievement in non-tested areas, that you could be a rich person probably, or at least richer person than you are now. Okay, the next one is House Bill 43. It's an odd name for what it actually does. It's called Education Program Sunset Amendments, which usually means things are ending. And it does end a few things, but it really just changes the name of the voucher program for Euphora and extends funding through 2028. It's currently set to expire at the end of this school year. So it attends to some funding things and a few deadline things, but this one is probably set to go through. We'll see how it shakes out. Okay, well, this is my favorite of the year, is HB 204. This is stipends for future educators. This is the student teacher stipend grant, which is brand new this year. And the bill is what we call colloquially a cleanup bill. It's after running it for 1 year, we've had some issues, and so we're trying to fix those things. It is going to expand the program so that student teachers who are student teaching in a Utah public school and attending any accredited university or college are eligible. That's the first one that adds. It also says that if you are working as an athletic coach, you are eligible. So if you got a student teacher who's helping out with the track team after school, they are no longer they are now eligible for the stipend. And it also attends to funding to make the funding be continuous. I see Travis has his yellow hand in the air.
Sorry to bug you, Malia.
No.
Just you may have already thought about this, but one recommendation we would make on this bill, particular, if anybody will listen,
Yep.
athletic coach is a little narrow. Expanding that to something similar to extracurricular activities, or so we can.
Okay.
Just a thought. I don't have the right words yet, but just athletic coach is kind of narrow when we talk about extracurricular stipends, is all I'm saying.
No, I like that language. That was just the language that had been provided to us in other feedback, and but we can certainly work with the bill sponsor on that amendment. I think she would be very amenable to it. She wants to really help people who are doing student teaching actually get funds to do the student teaching. So we'll write that down. 204. Okay. Do we have one more? I can't remember what else we have. Yes, SB 17. Um, this is a services for Department of Defense civilian employees and their spouses, which is not in the title. And it really means that anybody who falls into that category can work on their license from another state in Utah. So it really won't change anything for us as far as educator licensing goes, because the moment we identify that they have a license that is valid in another jurisdiction, we issue a Utah license, a professional license. So that is already, it passed through the Senate with the rule suspended on the floor. So now it's going to the House. This is an easy win for just about everybody. Boyd asks about the school guardian requirements. School guard, I know we didn't put it in the slides. It's, oh gosh, I
The
see.
school safety bill,
Yeah.
right? That we
Yeah,
talked about
it's in
yesterday.
the school safety bill. It's in here, I've got it right here. They're working on, if it's not already out, they're posing a substitute bill. It's HB 40. And so that's part of what they're working on is the school guardian portion, I know. It does not look like, well, because it hasn't been moved yet, we don't have the substitute yet. The substitute bill hasn't been posted because it has to be moved in a committee or on the floor. So we'll see when that goes into play. This is going to be a hot topic one for sure that everybody's eager to know what happens. But it's
It's
HB 40 is the one.
okay.
I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah, there's that one. The next one on our list is HB 281, which is Health Curriculum and Procedures Amendments, and it amends a couple of different things. One is there's a lot of specific information around the health curriculum. I'm not very well versed in that section, so I would forward all of your questions regarding the health curriculum to Jody Parker, our health specialist. For the licensing side of things, or things that are related to licensing, is that it requires parental consent for providing in-school mental health therapy. It also defines that the only person in a school who can do that are individuals who hold a DOPPEL license. And but that said, people with an educator license in school psychology or school social work, they can provide in-school mental health therapy to students with IEPs or 504s. If this bill is passed as it is, then the board would likely need to amend their scope of practice board rule for school psychologists, school social workers, and school counselors to really define the difference between therapy and counseling, because that is a world of difference in that space. But there's nothing else that really is changing as far as educate. It doesn't impact educator licensing, just perhaps the scope of practice for those individuals with those licenses. Yes. I'm going to pass back the baton, but
All
I'm
right,
still.
so that's all for the legislative updates. And I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Maybe I'll give it a minute. Any other questions about legislative updates? Okay. So now we do have one board rule amendment. So our big teacher prep rule, R277304 is going to go up for committee review in February. And these are the amendments that we're asking the board to make. The big one is going to be asking them to review the new special ed foundational competencies that were released for public comment in December. We've made some revisions to those competencies based on that public comment. And so now they're ready for the board to review. If the board approves them, then in the next 2 months, so usually this goes to committee first, so they'd go to committee in February and then full board in March. Assuming it doesn't get delayed, they could approve them by March, and then we would, in the board rule, it says that there's an implementation date of September 1st, 2027. Which kind of brings us to, we've had a lot of feedback from the field about how much work it takes to implement these competencies, and that work can not necessarily be accomplished within a year. So with that, we are also asking the board to delay the implementation date for the general teacher preparation competencies and the elementary content competencies for another year to September 1st, 2026. So if the board approves that, then we wouldn't need your approval templates to us until 2026. Now, this does not include the literacy competencies because the literacy competencies were approved in 2019. So we've had several years to implement those already. And so we would probably still need to see how your program aligns to the elementary literacy competencies. But we could delay the general teacher preparation and the other elementary content competencies for another year. But we'll see how the board does on that. And then the other things we're cleaning up are removing some required tests. So it still says that there's a content assessment required for special ed. And we've moved to making it an option for demonstrating competency. And so we wanted to clean that language up. And then we've had a lot of back and forth about what does the early childhood license qualify somebody to teach. And there are several general education preschool classes where the early childhood license is what qualifies them for. So in the board rule, right now it says that early childhood covers kindergarten through grade 3, and we are going to have it changed to preschool through grade 3. So that could be an interesting discussion as well. I'm looking at some questions. Travis is asking, any sense on the board's current thoughts on that delay? I know that in the past, delays like that can annoy them depending on the members and their focus. I think it's hard to say because we've got new board members and we don't know how all of them are going to take it yet. But so far it's been pretty positive. As we've talked, we do have a lot of board members who are, over schools and APPEL programs, and I think they'll welcome the change. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that that'll go well. And then I think we had so those are broadcast, right, or just recorded and released. So yes, you can watch all the board meetings on YouTube. If you go to the USBE channel on YouTube, it'll usually just be popped right up, and they are live. There's like a 10-15 second delay sometimes, but you can watch those as they're happening, and then they also make them available to go back and watch later if you would like. Or you can come in person and watch them. And if you wanted to make public comment, you're welcome to do that. When we get it on the agenda, it's not quite on the agenda yet, but we can also send out, if you want to make public comment, how you could do that. Oh, Molly has already done that. Excellent. Any other questions about those board rule amendments? Shonda says, the delay goes through, huzzah. I'd love to use next year as a pilot year rather than implementation year. Test out our proposal. I think that sounds like a great idea. And it doesn't prevent you from doing it earlier. If you were like, oh my gosh, I've already done all this work and, I want to start, you're more than welcome to. But it does kind of give us a little bit of breathing room. And then I think for any time we adjust or amend competencies, we'll just, do our best to make sure that there's a standard 2-year implementation phase anytime we approve them, which is why we're recommending that special ed competencies have an implementation date for 2027, which is 2 years from this year. Maria says, so I should not plan on offering new courses this fall. We can talk about that. And that's maybe part of the feedback that we could get. We've been discussing how there could be a need to do a crosswalk between those courses with the old competencies and the new competencies. So even if you're offering the new courses, they could be available to candidates that are still on the old competencies because they still meet the old competencies. So let's chat about that, Maria, and we'll see what works best. That's a great segue into kind of our implementation update. So if the board does approve an extension, this might change a little bit, but we wanted to share with you what we've been working on so far. This was according to the implementation timeline that we shared back in July. And it says that from June 2024 to March 2025, the USB licensing staff will release additional resources. The big one was the General Teacher Preparation Guidebook that we released in July, I believe. And so you can click the link there and look at that. There's a lot of great resources about what does competency look like, how could it be measured, that is helpful. And then this is the instructions for how to align your program to the new competencies. This was technically an email that was sent out, and then we created a copy of the email in our Google folder. Oh, it's not letting me click the links. Okay, hold on just 1 second. Anyway, there's a copy of the email. So if you lost your email or need to remember how to submit evidence for approval, then there's a copy of what was shared there in that link. And then, hold on just 1 second. Let me go back here. So in here is basically everybody has a folder. In this folder is your individual folder where you have your template, where we would like you to put all of your resources so it's easier for us to find. Once you have that completed, you're welcome to notify Jennifer Prince. It used to say Andrew, so I changed that. But so contact Jennifer Prince now, and then universities will contact Greg, and then we'll make revisions and provide feedback so that hopefully all the programs will be approved by August. If the board approves the extension, then we'll just push all of these dates back to 2026 rather than 2025. The assumption here is that by that date, your program is ready to support candidates in adopting those new competencies. So you may still have candidates that are working on the old competencies, and that's fine. But for candidates that are starting the program in the fall of 2025 or 2026, whatever happens, that your program has courses available and is ready to support them in demonstrating those competencies. And I see a question. Is this what we can ask about? Oh, yes. Getting started. Yes. Good question. So yes, we can definitely answer questions during the office hours. We also are working on, this is just kind of an update, is that our staff has been working with our partners, IHE partners, including Salt Lake Community College and SUU, Southern Utah University, who were really close to getting their courses aligned and approved. It's probably going to be another month for that. But then we can provide you a list of which courses align to those competencies and whether the titles are and the course descriptions, so that you can communicate that to your candidates, and you can also put it in your template. We've also been developing new microcredentials. We've had some great partners who have developed some draft microcredentials that we're making some revisions to. So hopefully in the next month, we'll have those available in MIDAS system so that people can register for those. I'm seeing lots of comments. So Shonda says, if the delay is not approved, will resources be available to us supporting our proposal development? Yes. So we're going to continue to work and get all of this done by March. So we're on track to have that available for you by March. And this is part of the topic when you said, can we talk about this at the office hours? Yes. We've had some trainings during our monthly meetings, and then we'd like to schedule additional trainings as needed. So that's part of the feedback that we're going to ask for you today. Crystal asked, we got a course alignment from Slick at the conference in October. Any idea when SU for the beginning of the year? Yes. So we're hoping. We met with Slick twice in the last 2 weeks, or not Slick, SUU, and they're really close. So we're hoping by February we'll have that list that we can then approve and share with you. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. They had some personnel issues that had made some delays. So I think we're doing good though. We're back on track. Okay, so we have, so we're going to hold multiple workshops. One of them is going to start right now. But if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. I see one more question. The guidebook is finished. It's as we've been going through and talking about this evaluation piece that we will talk about in just a minute, we may be making some adjustments to the guidebook to reflect those evaluation conversations. So we may be adding additional resources to it, but what we have there is great. Candace is asking 1st of February for university courses. We're gonna shoot for March, 1st of March probably. I'm hopeful that we'll have it sooner, but I can't nail it down specifically yet, but we're getting close. But if you have, she says the guidebook has been helpful when I hit a demonstration competency that I need ideas for. That's great. And then the micro-credentials, I think we'll probably get first before the courses, but we're hopeful in the next month or two that we'll have all of that ready for you. Amy says the guidebook does not have evidence examples for all competencies. That's good feedback, Amy. If there's a particular competency that you're struggling with, let us know and we'll see if we can't improve that. One of the reasons why we moved the guidebook to a Google Doc so that we could make some updates as needed. So let us know what we need to update. Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments, so I'm going to start here. As we've been talking about, the reason why we've been working with the IHEs and getting these micro-credentials ready is so that by the time all that's done, there should be an easy button for all of this, for all of the programs that would like to go the easy way. And we're kind of give you an idea of what that might look like so that you can decide whether you want to go the easy way or whether you want to make some changes. And I don't know if I'd call it the hard way, but maybe it's the more creative way. We could call it that. So what the easy way looks like right now is for all the basic concept knowledge and application competencies, candidates will essentially have two choices. One is that they can complete an approved IHE course, which right now will be through Salt Lake Community College or SUU. Or we'll also have the micro-credentials available. And the intent for the micro-credentials is that they're going to work for all the competencies, for both the concept knowledge, application, and the demonstration competencies. So they'll just, and they can do mix and match. They could do some courses and some micro-credentials. We've been trying to have the micro-credentials kind of aligned to the courses, but even Salt Lake Community College and SUU are doing their courses differently, so they may not align completely. So we can take a look at that. We've also been looking at the micro-credentials doing really micro so that there may be multiple micro-credentials in a stack, but the micro-credentials are really small so they could get them done quickly, and they applied to like 2 or 3 competencies as opposed to like 7 or 8 competencies. So that might help candidates who are kind of doing a mix and match be able to not have to duplicate a lot of work. Okay, so then Sean, this is a great question. So if your program would like to create their own courses, um, then yes, that would need to be approved through Midas. What we would like to see happen is that you would share with us your course title, course description, learning outcomes in the template when you submit that for review so that we can see how it aligns to the competencies. And then once that's approved, then we can get it approved in Midas. And so all of the courses will need to be improved in Midas for USBE credit. And we have a meeting set up with JC to kind of walk us through that to make sure that um, we're still in compliance with their regulations. And so hopefully there'll be an easy button for that as well. That will have a template that you can fill out that will make it really easy to get those courses approved. So Sean is like, yeah, our courses are already created. That is true. They've already been using courses for a while. So if you want to continue to do that, then you'll need to show how those courses align to the new competencies. And then for the demonstration competencies, we have, so there was a question on who and where do we submit our courses and how do we get those on Midas? So in the approval template, and I know this is from Elizabeth Academy, when you guys are pretty new, so we might need to set up a meeting with you because I don't think you have a template yet. So we will get you one, and then we'll walk you through that process. And then basically the approval template shows how your program will align to the competencies, where you'll share where the course titles and descriptions are. And then once that is approved, then we can get the courses into Midas. Okay, so for the demonstration competencies, the assumption here is that they are done in a classroom with students, and our micro-credentials will cover those, but it also lends itself really well to being evaluated by a school administrator using an approved checklist or rubric. And this is the part that we haven't quite ironed out yet. And so this is what we would like your feedback on today. So as we've been talking to Julie Lundell, who is our educator evaluation specialist here at USBE, some of you are aware that USBE changed their evaluation guidelines, and we've been talking with her through that process to see how it could align really well to APPEL evaluation, and how it might not align. And so I am going to turn the time over to her to talk about this new growth-oriented system to see, so we can start that conversation about what does that look like, what might need to happen to support you in that area.
Hey, thanks, Lisa. I'm Julie Lindell, and I'm the USB specialist over educator evaluation. And I just want to give you a kind of a, Lisa calls this elevator speech, the quick overview of evaluation changes, which some of your districts or charters have really been heavily involved in, so it may be quite familiar to you, and others maybe not so much. So growth-oriented evaluations, this change came about over the last few years from a stakeholder work group that met and developed a vision for evaluation to be focused on growing educators over time. Initially, evaluation, especially across the nation, but including in Utah, came around 2010-ish in the No Child Left Behind era. And kind of the intent was to make sure that we didn't have bad educators staying in the field. And now, 15 years later, we've really looked at it like, well, 95 to 97% of our educators are staying in the field, and we want them to stay in the field. And so we should have a system that's focused on supporting that 95%, as well as indicating if someone is having trouble, but that the overall emphasis should be on the 95% of educators who we're growing. So that vision was developed from that stakeholder group, and spent a couple of years working through legislature and with the board, and then in 2024 actually passed some legislative updates and also passed some rule updates that were focused on growth-oriented evaluation. And then last summer, we rolled out a model evaluation system from the state that LEAs can choose to adopt or not. They can use the same parameters and design their own program, but maybe roughly 60% of our LEAs do use the state program, and the others will use the parameters that are outlined, but maybe have their own system in place. So all of our state evaluation resources are on our webpage that are linked in this slide if you want to dig further into that. But let's go to the next slide. So requirements on educator evaluation are self-assessment, goal setting, stakeholder input from parents and students, multiple observations with feedback, student learning growth measures, and professional development growth. Now, these requirements from educator evaluation in many cases tie very closely to the requirements in the APPEL program. For example, having self-assessment and goal-setting processes and having multiple observations. Quite a few of the components of our educator evaluation system already align very closely. So that was kind of where we started from when Lisa and I started talking, is what aligns here, what maybe is a little bit different, but we, could this work in a dual purpose kind of space? So we can have the next slide. So the biggest thing to think about when thinking about evaluation and growth-oriented evaluation is the difference between evaluation and observation. And I want to really make this clear because previously, especially if you were an LEA that used the state model was one document. That document, when an administrator went to observe in a classroom, they were evaluating. It was just a one-shot experience. When you're there, that teacher was being evaluated, and that form became their evaluation, where they're getting a score on how well they're doing. So in growth-oriented evaluation, we've really tried to separate these two into two different areas. So we have evaluation, which is kind of that summative experience. There are formative pieces to it. In formative evaluation, you have goal setting and self-assessment, and you're having observations with feedback. And that is a growth experience for the educator. It is also collecting data over time, but the biggest important part of that formative part is just that we're growing people. We're giving them feedback. We're helping them grow their skills. More of a coaching kind of experience and goal reflection on goals and setting goals and growing. Now there's a summative evaluation piece to it where you actually are, that's required in legislation that you actually do score, according to the US, how each educator is doing. Now, in our summative evaluations, this can actually happen up to every 4 years. And I think of it as like a portfolio experience. All the evidence is brought to the table. All of the observations are brought to the table. Student growth measures, professional growth, everybody, looking at all the data, and then that scoring is done on, being effective or not effective or partially effective. Up to every 4 years for a career teacher, but I want to say with a caveat of when you're dealing with APPEL teachers, you're usually talking about provisional teachers, and most LEAs would have policies in place, and we would recommend that they have policies in place that they are at least annually, if not more often. Some choose to do it twice a year, which is fine, that they are actually doing some kind of a summative experience. So for an APPEL teacher, that's more likely happening at least once a year. But for a career teacher, it might only be that summative experience might only be happening up to every 4 years. Now let's contrast that real briefly with an observation, because those are the two that get kind of conflated sometimes. An observation is the actually visiting the classroom. You can hear it, you can see it, you can touch the lesson plan. You're actually, it might be a meeting, such as a PLC meeting or an IEP meeting, or maybe a parent-teacher conference of some sort, but it's actually a physical experience that you can see and be a part of. You wouldn't see all the standards and competencies at once. Previously, that one-time evaluation, they were kind of expecting to see a lot in a small window. We don't, now feel like that's really realistic. When you go to an observation as an administrator or a mentor or coach, they're just seeing part of the picture. So they're, checking off things that they see, giving feedback on the things they see. Over the course of a year, you would want to see all the standards or all of the competencies, but that is only going to happen if you have had multiple observations to get that kind of information. And then always we just really recommend and have actually encouraged that in board rule that the teachers are always having feedback on that observation experience. So preferably even in-person feedback, but written feedback, but some kind of opportunity to know how they did after an observation, and what were some strengths, what were some a spot they could grow on, and having those post observation conversations. So I think the clearest thing to do when you're thinking about evaluation versus observation is that in-person classroom feedback experience. Evaluation is when you're actually scoring their progress. And for APPEL candidates, there is a requirement that there is an evaluation. So that would be that at some point there's a scoring of how they're doing on all these competencies. Lisa, next.
Thank you, Julie. We appreciate that. She's going to stick around and help us with answering questions as well. So this kind of brings us to, what does this mean for APPEL candidates? So if your APPEL candidates are teachers of record, they are likely having to go through this evaluation process already, which does have a lot of advantages in that with our new EPP standards, we're going to be looking for evidence that candidates have had opportunities to self-assess, set goals, and receive feedback on their demonstration of competency. So this evaluation process could be a natural way of showing how the candidates are having those experiences. But it is relatively new and it's not something we've done before. And so that's where we are kind of bringing it to you to say, and then it's also in board rule, it only required for district, not charters. And so that's where we were kind of like, okay, well, we could provide a really great model of how evaluations could look for APPEL candidates, but this is an area where a lot of people want to do their own thing. And so we don't want to go through all that work if everybody's just going to do their own thing anyway. So we're going to be asking for some feedback from you of what is it that you really need in this field, in this area, and we can try and help you with that. In the board rule, it does say that every candidate has to complete a clinical experience, and the definition of that clinical experience, it says that they have to be evaluated by a school administrator. In the board rule, it doesn't specify what that evaluation looks like or specifically what they're getting evaluated on, but we do have to show that they are meeting those competencies. So it seems like a natural thing that when the school administrator goes in to observe them or does that evaluation, that they are evaluating them on the competencies, which the current evaluation system does not necessarily align to specifically to those competencies. So there may be some adjustment there in your system in communicating with administrators and saying, okay, because this is an APPEL candidate, they really need to be evaluated on these competencies, and then here's some resources to help with that. Or you may decide that we don't want to mess with administrator evaluations, but because we're going to have our own way of evaluating competency and that they're going to submit that evidence instead, which is also fine. So where it says that APPEL candidates should demonstrate competencies in the classroom with students and that the competencies are aligned to the standards. So if they're demonstrating those competencies, they are meeting that evaluation where it says it has to be aligned to the effective teaching standards. And I think that was something that we talked to Julie about, it's like, well, even if they are showing that they're doing those competencies, is that going to mean that they're out of compliance with the evaluation criteria? And that's not necessarily the case. So that was good to see. And then as we did, this says, this is just from 304, where it says candidates enrolled in teacher preparatory programs must complete clinical experiences where they are evaluated by a teacher leader, school administrator, university preparation program faculty member in order to develop and demonstrate competency in the skills and knowledge necessary to be an effective teacher. So how we've, like she was talking about, the definition of evaluation is a little more comprehensive than just going in and observing. And a lot of those evaluations, as we were looking at the resources, they look very similar to like a professional learning plan where you're gathering all that evidence, and then you sit down with the candidate and you have a conversation about how they're doing on those competencies. And so we think that the professional learning plan could be a really important piece here where that is part of their evaluation, and that we are just adding some additional observation rubrics or checklists that could be used to show that they are targeting specifically those competencies, and that those are used as evidence in their professional learning plan. So I realize there's a lot of information, and we're just kind of getting our feet wet today on this to try and get some feedback on what your thoughts are. Good. I see Joy Lynn. Excellent. Yes, Joy Lynn.
So where we're at right now, where we're still using the old program, but the new UITS evaluation observation forms have been starting to be utilized. Which one should we now be including with our PLPs for our current enrolled Apple students or
That
teachers?
is a great question. So for current candidates, they can use the same system that we've been using for the last 4 or 5 years. This, we're talking about what will we use for candidates that start when the new competencies go in place. And I know that, there might be some talk about starting that earlier, and that's fine. But we, as far as showing that your program aligns to the new competencies, there needs to be evidence that they have demonstrated the demonstration competencies in a classroom with students, which could be through an evaluation, it could be through an observation, it could be through a micro-credential, or it could be through something else. And that's part of what we're asking for feedback on, because there could be a whole range of things that programs could be doing to show that they have demonstrated those competencies. And we want to be able to provide as many resources as possible with whatever your program decides to do. But I realize that's not really an answer, because we don't have a really easy answer to that. It depends on how you would like to do it.
So, Lisa, my question is more pertaining to my current Apple teachers. So I'm in the old program, but potentially I have a school administrator using the new evaluation tool. Can I use that new evaluation tool inside the older Apple program? So currently my evaluation is based on the 10 UIT standards, but now we have 5 UIT standards, and the evaluation looks a lot different, or that observation looks a lot different. Can I use those new forms, or do I still need to have evaluations on the old 10 competency UITs?
No, because, well, okay. Our current expectation is that candidates have to be evaluated according to the UITs. So if they're using the new UITs where there's 5 instead of 10, that still meets that definition, because the definition of UITs has changed. So as long as they're being evaluated on the UITs, then they're fine.
And so it doesn't matter if it's the old UITs or the new UITs that they're currently being evaluated on.
Yeah, that's correct. The tricky part is going to be when we are adopting the competencies, is that there does need to be evidence that they have demonstrated competency. And evaluations could be used to demonstrate competency if it's clear how those evaluations are evaluating the competency, if that makes sense. And that's part that might take some finagling, and that's kind of what we're talking about today. So adjustment, I guess I should say. Crystal, I do see a hand. Let's go to Crystal.
So you're asking for feedback on what we think about using evaluations in our new demonstration competencies, right?
Yes.
So I've been diving pretty deeply for the last couple months into how our district is going to do it. And I really liked the checklist system that we saw from, was it Carbon County at our Apple conference, and I used that for quite a few. But when it came to that professional responsibility section, that's where I found our evaluation system as really useful. And so while I haven't submitted it to you guys yet, for the one that's like exhibit professional and ethical conduct, that kind of thing that is absolutely observable and must be observable by the principal. We were like, my plan is to use our evaluation because we did jump into the new it's five, the new 5 standard UETs with our evaluation this year. So we've been doing it this year to kind of see how that works. But I honestly, without making it feel like a hoop to jump, I don't see a better way to do, especially that professional responsibility section, other than that principal evaluation and that principal observation, particularly for those, maintaining all the laws and responsibilities of an educator. Those standards are kind of an easy fit with the evaluation.
I like that. That's a good. Thank you for sharing that. I see Travis's hand, and then I'll go to the questions in the chat.
Thanks. I just wanted to kind of I may be beating a dead horse at this point, and I apologize if that's the case. But I think I didn't hear you say anything about the fact that we couldn't like use both. I mean, so when I was listening to that, it was very much, well, I'm going to use my evaluation because that's going to show things. And then I'm going to have to compare that evaluation, whichever one it is, to the actual competencies. And if there's anything missing, then I got to fill in the gaps, however I do that. And so from my perspective, it's really just a matter of documentation, because evaluation is easy to document. We are already required to do it. We already have it. It's just may not be in the same place as our Apple stuff, right? And from there, it's just a cross map to say, okay, this part isn't in the evaluation. So how do I document this with my principals? That could be simple, that could be complicated, whatever works for you as a program, you're just filling in gaps and providing documentation. I just don't think it's going to be as big a deal as maybe we're concerned about, because I think when you really look, particularly districts, charter schools, I'm sorry, you have a little bit different. But districts, when we look at our evaluation and we compare it to competencies, there's not going to be very many holes. So that's just my opinion. Thanks.
Lisa,
I like it.
Lisa, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
Sure. So as I'm hearing these comments, which sound great, it also makes me think, so one thing Lisa and I have kind of walked through is we did crosswalk the competencies to the UETs, and to the evaluation, and it crosswalks really well. Like, good news, we're all teaching the same thing, right? So those competencies are very well covered in the UETs, and so super well covered in the current evaluation system that has been designed, whether the state system or whether your district is designing their own with the UETs. It aligns well. So one thing that we could offer, and this is something Lisa and I have been like kicking around, is this helpful or not? But on that summative evaluation document, so not necessarily talking about exactly what is on an observation rubric, but on a summative evaluation document, currently, like say in Tooele, who's using a new system, they've got the 5 UET standards on there. We could design a summative document for Apple candidates that had the Apple competencies, and it would crosswalk to the UET, so it would make sure it matched. We had one for each of them, or more than one for each of them, but so that when you actually looked at a summative document, instead of seeing the UETs, you would see the competencies. Would that be helpful for someone who's trying to evaluate an Apple educator to like have a slightly different final summative document that's aligned to the competencies? Or is that like just one more thing and you're like, no, we're fine with just a UETs document? So what's your thought about that, having a slightly different worded form that's aligned to the competencies?
Sorry, I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, Crystal, you might know where you've kind of been in that space, or you might have thoughts.
I feel for us, I think my principals would have a difficult time, because then we're asking them to do either an additional or a separate, and they already have a hard enough time keeping straight what I'm telling them I need done. I actually think for us, anyways, I can only speak for us, is that the way we have our evaluation now, it's not too difficult for me to pick out from the current what I need, I guess, if that makes sense, the way we have it laid out.
So in your mind, doing the educator evaluation with the US, whatever system which every district is going to be doing an evaluation with the US
Right.
with, fairly shortly. They're all working on that. That it would be easier just to go ahead and let that evaluation be the same as all the other educators using the US on that summative evaluation. And you as the Apple director know you can crosswalk that easily, but it's not necessarily for the principal changing any wording.
Precisely, because me as I am looking at their stuff and I'm pulling, I know I'm going to go, like, as I'm doing my template for our Apple program, I know, like I said, for the PR, the professional responsibility section, I know I'm going to go pull their evaluation and I'm looking for XYZ. And I think that's easier for me to do because I'm going to have to check it whether they do a separate one or whether they do the same one. I still have to check it either way. So not maybe somebody else would find that helpful. I think for me, that would be a lot of work on your part that I probably wouldn't use.
I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat because it might help with this conversation. It says, so Susan says, we matched the Cognia Elliott to the UX and made sure they were covered with you. Are we okay to still use this? Yes. So there's kind of two pieces to this. One is that candidates have to be evaluated. So that's like a given. And if that's what you're using for evaluation, then that's great. But then the other question is that are you going to use evaluation as demonstration competency? And that's a question that we're still kind of struggling with at the moment because as we've been going through, there's some evaluation pieces that work really well as a demonstration of competency, but there may be gaps, as Travis said, that are not all covered. And so what maybe help if you have an evaluation system that you really love, what might be helpful is to we can help with this also if you want to set up a meeting, is to kind of do a crosswalk between what is it that you're evaluating and does it align to the competencies. And so you may already be evaluating competencies and we just don't have documentation of it. But there may be some gaps there. And so if there are gaps, then there would need to be additional evidence that shows how they're meeting those specific competencies. And that's something that we could help with in like creating a rubric or a guidance document or whatever it is that we need to help with those gaps. Or you could create some, I know some programs have already identified, like for example, I'm thinking of the competency that says the candidates have to meet with a parent and discuss student needs. That particular competency is probably not being evaluated through your evaluation system. But the competency of that they provide formative and timely feedback to students probably is. So that it's just kind of a crosswalk. It's like, okay, well, these competencies are going to be evaluated through our evaluation system. Then we would need to see the evaluation as part of your program review. Or we're going to evaluate them, great, and we're going to show that they were evaluated successfully by saying yes, they passed their evaluation, but the evidence that shows that they're meeting competency is going to look different. Like maybe they're submitting some portfolio or they're submitting other evidence that shows that they've demonstrated those competencies. It looks like Joylyn says that for those in charter schools, it may be helpful to have some, I think what Julie was talking about, that it might be helpful to have that. Kelly says, I think just seeing your crosswalk that you did with Lisa would be helpful. So we can share that. And then Boyd says, agree, keep it as simple as possible for school administrators. Okay, so we were gonna, if you haven't already, I realize we're like quickly running out of time. So we might like do this more. Maybe we'll send this out as an email or we'll add this to our February meeting. But for those of you that didn't get a chance to share and you would like to share, you can put them in this document or you can drop your thoughts in the chat, whatever works best for you. We were just trying to capture as many ideas as possible in the time that we had. So we've had some great feedback in the discussion, which has been helpful. I really appreciate that. But this is something that we can keep working on. And if you come up with ideas later, feel free to drop us a chat through email. I do see a few people in the document, so that's helpful. Are there any other questions about this? This is something that we were working on that we would like to have available when everything else is available, the micro-credentials and the courses and stuff, to help fill in those gaps as maybe needed. As we've been talking with our institutions of higher ed, they are wanting to focus specifically on those application and basic knowledge competencies. So taking the course will meet those competencies, but there's still going to be the demonstration competencies that they're going to need evidence that they have met. And we wanted to have another option besides just doing the micro credentials. So we thought that this, if we provided some resources for evaluation, that might help. And it sounds like yes, but we might need to make it a little bit more targeted to how it aligns to the UET so that you could kind of see, like use what you're currently using and then make it easier to fill in those gaps. Okay. Any other questions? I think we probably need to go to our Q&A. So I will, if I don't see anything else in the chat, I'll stop the recording